Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Is everybody in? What is that on our screen? We're viewing Nikki Johnson's whiteboard.
Do we stop it?
I'm not sure. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, we're ready for you, Dr. Herbst. We've got everybody.
Okay.
Unless Lauren, you want to welcome everybody? No? Okay.
You want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know how you run your roundtable, so this is my first time attending. I actually have a class that I have to go to, so I'm sitting in a parking lot before I go to my class, so I'm going to have to leave at 6:25 to go into the class. But I haven't really prepared anything for tonight, but I've been thinking about it a lot. Maybe when the time changes, I think I'll be able to attend more of these, and I'd love to maybe pull up a PowerPoint and stimulate a little bit of discussion that way. But I thought tonight I would give you my opinion on what is Dercum's disease, because I know that we all have different opinions of what it is, and I don't think we know exactly what it is. You can't write it on a piece of paper and know all of the underlying pathophysiology. And the reason for that is there are different types of Dercum's disease, in my opinion. And I'll give you some examples. So and you guys might have already talked about this, and I apologize, but there's the type that originates from familial multiple lipomatosis. So people start out their lives, they develop some lipomas, they're not very painful, and then something happens and they develop inflammation in their body, and then they develop pain in the lipomas. So for example, somebody maybe had an accident and they were stuck in bed for a long period of time, and they developed obesity, and the inflammation that goes along with the obesity activated inflammation within the lipomas, and it resulted in toxins surrounding nerves and pain. So that's one type. Another type is the angiolipomas, and I know you guys have heard a lot about angiolipomatosis from Steve D'Angelo, so I won't go into that in great detail, but that is a rare disease, and in my opinion, over time it ends up replacing all of the fat tissue on the body with an increased number of blood vessels. So like wherever you would biopsy, even if you don't feel a lipoma there, it's going to look like an angiolipoma eventually. And then the third type, and I would say that it's the most common type, would be what I call the healing disorder type of Dercum's disease, where people develop just rampant inflammation in their body, and it appears in the fat tissue. And in my opinion, it's because the fat tissue protects the body. So for example, if you have inflammation which affects your blood vessels, and in all honesty, it's very difficult to have inflammation without affecting your blood vessels. And your blood vessels start to leak because there's damage and inflammation within those vessels. Then your body ramps up glycosaminoglycans in that interstitial space and binds up the water so that it doesn't cause harm to the nearby cells. But by creating a gel, which is what you get when these glycosaminoglycans bind up water and salt, that gel inhibits flow through the tissue. So now you have poor blood flow in, poor lymph flow out, and you've got what we call a congested type of a tissue. And Shelley Krasinski from Vanderbilt has actually imaged this in lipedema. I bet you she's imaged some individuals with Dercum's disease as well. In fact, I know she has, because she is very interested in Dercum's disease. And if you haven't had her on the roundtable, you should. And I don't know what she's exactly found. And we were supposed to have a meeting a while back, but it got delayed. So hopefully she'll update me too on what she
have
found.
Started a conversation with her, Dr. Herbst.
Okay, so, good.
She's definitely on board.
Yeah, she really is, which is really great. I think the more investigators that we get interested in Dercum's disease, the better. Okay, so now we've got this congested tissue that has poor flow in it, and the body starts to react to that. The cells in the vicinity of that congested area send out signals and bring in immune cells, and then the body activates fibroblasts, and the body starts filling it in with scar, and the tissue becomes very fibrotic, and of course it's even more congested than before, and then the cycle just continues on. And if you don't resolve the inflammation, because you don't either you don't know you have it or you struggle resolving the inflammation, then that process continues, and the fat becomes lumpy and bumpy. And it's going to do this wherever you have blood vessels. And I was working with a patient, and I think she's on tonight, and we're talking about her Dercum's disease. And I said, you know, it really is everywhere because you have blood vessels everywhere, and that inflammation can spread very easily and very quickly in the body through inflammatory enzymes called matrix metalloproteinases, or MMPs. And these MMPs act like lightning. So if you activate one, for example, you eat something that causes inflammation in your gut, or you get an infection in your gut and you damage the gut lining, and a little bit of your gut contents enter into your tissue, the MMPs get activated, and they can just send inflammation throughout the entire body. And what that does is that those enzymes cleave off anything on the cell surface that's in their pathway. So we know that our cells have receptors on the cell surface, and those receptors bind hormones like thyroid hormones, or they bind leptin, or they bind other mediators in the body. But I think this is one of the reasons why leptin resistance can develop in people who have Dercum's disease. So the brain doesn't understand how much fat you have because it's not able to count the leptin molecules that are binding to leptin receptors. So it thinks it's not doesn't have enough fat tissue. So it starts to hold on to more fat tissue, and then the cycle continues. Same thing with thyroid hormone. You start to develop thyroid hormone resistance. So you start to look like you have subclinical hypothyroidism, or you have hypothyroidism, and then you start taking thyroid hormone to try and overcome that. Feed yourselves more hormone to bind to the few receptors that are left on the cells that aren't getting cleaved off by those MMPs. So that kind of circling inflammatory process I call a healing disorder. And that is based on Robert Navio's work. He would be another good person to have on your roundtable, because he also believes in Dercum's disease, because I talked to him about that like back in 2006. And he's like, yep, Dercum's disease is a mitochondrial disorder. And he agreed that it was likely in that spectrum of healing disorders. So what makes Dercum's disease so complicated for providers is you have these different types of Dercum's disease. You have the FML type, you have the angiolipoma type, you have the healing disorder type, and there's probably other types that I'm not mentioning right now. But for example, a woman with lipedema can develop non-lipedema obesity, and she then looks like she has Dercum's disease. And those are the patients where I say, you have lipedema, but you also look like you have Dercum's disease, so I have to give you a diagnosis of both. But if we, for example, put them on a GLP-1 and they lose weight, then they can get rid of that non-lipedema fat, that non-lipedema inflammation, and then they just look like they have lipedema again. But yet at some point, we call them Dercum's disease. But that means that GLP-1s heal Dercum's disease. So I think it's really a misnomer to be calling women with lipedema as having Dercum's disease unless they like have familial multiple lipomatosis from one side of the family and lipedema from the other, and they come together, then that would be a bona fide mixture of the two. But my goal with Dercum's disease is to identify all the different causes of inflammation to try and help resolve those so we can see what's left. And then also, I think part of the future of figuring out the pathophysiology of Dercum's disease is to do the genetics. And I'm in the process of working on that right now. And I've got a lot of patients who have done their genetics who have angiolipomas, but also the healing disorder type of Dercum's disease. And I have some FML as well, but just not enough because of course it's considered to be a rare disease. But I'm gonna keep on collecting. And we just hired a research scientist. And so I'm really hopeful that she will get interested in this genetics project to move it forward. Because even if we just find the gene for angiolipomas, I think that's going to help us understand other types of Dercum's disease and in addition lipedema. Because I don't know if you know about this, but with Sarah Al-Gadban, who's also very interested in Dercum's disease, in fact, she loves it. We were looking at lipedema tissue, and one of my friends who has lipedema had got a biopsy, and I said, I want to see her tissue so that I could talk to her about it. So I got on the microscope and I looked at it, and there were these patches of what looked like angiolipomas. And I said, did you see this? And Sarah's like, no. And she looked at it, she's like, oh my God, that looks like an angiolipoma. I'm like, I know. So she went back and she looked at all of our slides again, and we found out that about 35% of women with lipedema had these areas that look like angiolipomas. And so we called it angiogenesis. But could it be that the same type of physiology of Dercum's disease in terms of the angiolipoma type is also functioning at a certain level in women with lipedema, at least those 35% where we saw these areas of angiolipoma-like tissue. So I've talked a whole bunch. I don't know, do you allow questions or would you like me to continue to talk?
I think
Go
we'd
ahead.
like you to continue to talk, right, Ray?
If any of the panel would like to ask her a question, certainly, but whatever is best for Dr. Herbst.
I'd be happy to take questions if you had them. But if you don't, I could, you know, I can continue to talk. I just, yeah, I want to.
Okay. I would like to ask a question.
Yeah.
We talk about inflammation being a critical kind of diagnostic tool for Dercum's and lipedema. Is it possible to not have inflammation or not have high inflammation markers and still have Dercum's?
Yes. I totally believe it. I think that, for example, if somebody with Dercum's disease has mast cell issues, right? Mast cells live within tissue. They don't roam around the blood like your lymphocytes or your eosinophils. So if you have inflammation coming from mast cells and your CRP may be normal, your ESR may be normal, your sedimentation rate, and it may be very hard to even capture a mast cell mediators in the blood or urine. And that happens to me all the time. I have patients, I'm like, oh, hands down, you have mast cell issues. There's no doubt in my mind. I test for it, I get nothing. And part of the reason for that is we clinically don't have a lot of mediators that we can measure through the usual labs like LabCorp or Quest. And I mean, we could do super expensive send-out labs, but that's just not, that doesn't work for a lot of people. So I would say mast cells would be a subclinical cause of inflammation where you can't find any markers in the blood. And I will tell you, one of the things that we're finding in our genetics work is that people have variants in cytokine genes that increase the number of those cytokines in the body without any provocation. So for example, somebody could have a variant in the TNF alpha gene and make more TNF alpha. And it's been validated in multiple publications. So I know this to be true. And you measure TNF alpha in the blood and you can't find it. It's not high. So it's subclinically high, but it's entering different pathways or activating different pathways like the NF-kappa B pathway. And the NF-kappa B pathway is activating, but we're not measuring the NF-kappa B pathway mediators. So, you know, if we easily could, that would be great. So you may be inflamed and have high NF-kappa B pathway activation and you don't know it. So I absolutely believe you can have that. Inflammation is so complex. There are so many inflammatory pathways. Every time I turn around, I'm writing down another inflammatory pathway and the genes associated with it to try and better understand it. So absolutely.
Hey, Dr. H, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So do you think each of the different subtypes has different mutations then? Do they have different drivers? Or do you think it's more to do with, the environment where they arise?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would say for familial multiple lipomatosis, I think there's a variant in a tumor suppressor gene. Just haven't figured out what tumor suppressor gene it is, and maybe we just don't know what that gene is. For angiolipomatosis, I think it's something different. So between those two alone, I would say, yes, there's probably a different genetic cause. But at the same time, the processes that are activated by variants in the genes might be at such a low level that they really don't affect the body until you have a surgery, or you develop obesity, or you get an infection, or you have a trauma, or you undergo a dramatic stress, or you live in an environment where you're exposed to allergens that you weren't exposed to before. So I do think that environment plays a critical role in the development of Dercum's disease, because so many of my patients over the years have said, I was fine till I had a car accident, or I was fine till I had a hysterectomy. So there was like a very serious, emotionally stressful event. And we know that stress activates mast cells. So I think your point is well taken, that it's probably a combination between environment and genetics. And for example, what if I have patients who grew up around pesticides? So those people were exposed for a long period, and all of a sudden, they had a second event happen, and then their gene variant became very important, and it all came together and caused Dercum's disease. That's an excellent question.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest questions in the field still is, how does this arise? And it seems to occur spontaneously in some people and can go away in some people, where in others it's there from birth and continues on. So that suggests it's a combination of genetic and epigenetic factors. But again, which ones?
Well, that's why we published that paper, Infections Preceding the Onset of Dercum's Disease, because so many of my patients were saying, I got this infection and then I got my lumps or my lipomas. And I would hear the opposite, as well. But after a while, so many people said it that we had to publish that paper. And we had more patients, but we wrote down that we were only going to publish 7, and the IRB wouldn't let us publish anymore. So yes, and that's an infectious cause, right? That's an inflammatory cause of Dercum's disease right there.
Dr. Herbst, I've had quite a number of patients come to me with Lyme disease, and I
Mhm.
sent them to you, and and I had diagnosed them with Dercum's disease, and it was true. And many of the symptoms, mast cell activation, Epstein-Barr, so many of the symptoms overlap.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in that paper, a bunch of your patients were in that paper, Linda. And yeah, so thank you for sending them, because I think that, has started a better understanding of how inflammation in the body can set off Dercum's disease. I just wish we knew a gene, and we just need a little bit more work in the field to find that.
And can you speak to the importance of the glycocalyx and the endothelial lining for Dercum's disease?
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's no work on that right now. But what I do with my patients is I suggest two things to improve the stability of the blood vessels. One is to take diazomin as micronized purified flavon fraction. That protects the outside of the vessel. At least this is what I say. And then arteriocil or other seaweed products that protect the glycocalyx on the inside of the vessel. And once that glycocalyx is broken down, you definitely get leakiness of the vessels. And as I mentioned my patient earlier, we were talking about her leaky blood vessels, and she has Dercum's disease, and we could see the leaky blood vessels in her body. And most likely her glycocalyx is broken down, but it's more than that. The blood vessels actually dilate. And that's where that overlap with lipedema happens, because if you look back at a paper by Curry and Merlin, for lipedema, they said that the definition of lipedema is a dilated vessel in the background of congestion. And I think you could say the same thing for Dercum's disease as well. So I would say for anyone with Dercum's disease, you want to try and protect your blood vessels as best you can. And bioflavonoids are helpful, but bioflavonoids are notoriously poorly absorbed. So you want to make sure you get one that's well absorbed. And there's a variety of different, variations, lipophilic formulations, and the micronized purified flavon fractions that you can use.
Well,
I have about
I think we
2
better
minutes.
get
Yeah,
to your
minutes.
minute.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ray. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Can we take
My
you
pleasure.
give
I wish
2
I could
minutes?
stay
Can
longer.
you answer this one question? Is there a way to get you
Absolutely.
additional samples of tissue, Dr. Herbst?
Tissue samples.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I mentioned, we just hired a research scientist, and one of her first jobs is going to be to set us up to accept tissue samples. So I would say she's not starting till the 25th of October, and then we're going to the Lipedema World Congress in Rome. So probably I would say if you would check back with us around December 1st, I think
December
that would
1st.
be a great time, and we will probably start accepting samples.
Thank you for answering that.
You're welcome. I would greatly value that, because the more the better. The more genetics we get, the better too. So thank you everyone, who's donated their sample so far. And thank you for this invitation to speak tonight. And hi Ellen, and I hope you have a great rest of your webinar.
And I'll see you in Rome.
See you in Rome. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Lauren?
Wow,
Do you-
it's almost like you need a breath. Woof. That was incredible.
Yes, it was.
And now
Dr.
we
Derek-
should be ready for Dr. Derek's presentation, which we're all really excited about.
Hi, y'all. Can you hear me? I'm doing something unique. I have my phone on and my desktop.
I love that. Hi, y'all.
Hi. Oh, good. So you can't hear me. Okay, great. Okay, so it is a deep breath. And how exciting was that talk? As a physician, it's really exciting, guys, to talk receptors and MMP cleaving. It's very exciting. What an exciting talk that she gave us. And we honestly, we did not have time to coordinate before, but she just segued absolutely into our next step. And so what I'd like to do is frame, she gave us a very micro anatomic view of inflammation. And in medicine, we talk micro. When we say microanatomy, we're really talking about receptors. We're talking about the lining of a blood vessel. We're talking about the small pieces that make, us stay alive and repair ourselves. And what my job, it's a big job, is to try to connect her micro anatomy lesson that she just gave us to connect it to a macro anatomy piece. And the macro anatomy piece is a venous blood vessel. And so I want to talk about that because these are really connected. And I genuinely believe, although we have not proven it, I know Karen is working on this, but I genuinely believe that Dercum's and lipedema are one day going to be, classified as, a vascular disorder. And it just makes sense. And I hope by the end of my presentation that you will see why. So this is me, just so you know, my name. I have 2 offices. So Boxbar Vascular is where I started this big adventure about 10 years ago. And Boxbar Beauty is I'm piloting a specific fat disorder clinic. Like I'm just trying to, do my own thing, like a classic Texas female surgeon. And so that's where that is. I have a MD, a master's in public health, and I'm a fellow of some surgical societies. So this is nothing new, and I'm not going to read it. It's included just for completeness for people that were unable to join us in person today and that will look at this online. Okay, I love this. This is a picture of the micro world that Karen just spoke about. And when we talk about functions in the body, whether it's physiologic, whether it's a microanatomy or macroanatomy, like a blood vessel, it all boils down to the capillary bed, what she talked about. That's where the gel is and where things do not get cleared. It all leads here. Whether we're talking about a brain cell, a muscle cell in the heart, whether we're talking about the mechanics of a PQRS that you see on an EKG, it is all determined by the capillary. And, I also love ancient history. And there was a saying way back then that all roads lead to Rome. And so the little map next door shows you that. So it's the concept that everything is determined. Our correct processes that are not diseased and our diseased processes are determined really in this capillary level. So when was Dercum's first diagnosed? So 1892 by Francis Xavier Dercum. And this is a copy of the very first paper. And it is exciting to hear how far we've come, even though sometimes it feels like we're just taking our first step on the moon. I want to point out that we are on the moon now. And in 1892, the Earth was still flat. So we have really come a long way. And the message there is we just got to keep going. Epidemiology and demographics. I really like to frame fat disorders as a real blessing. And it back in the day, before it was disordered. And Karen said it really well. And she said, in her opinion, that the fat part of this process is attempting for the fat cells to protect the body. And it is absolutely what makes sense. And if you can just imagine the genetic component, let's just take ourselves back several thousand years, and it's cave person time. And it was a very stressful time, guys. I am sure there were some leftover dinosaurs, we call them dragons in our local myths. We were living in caves. We didn't know if it was the red berry or the blackberry. We didn't know anything. I'm sure there were other clans that were trying to steal our cave. It was horrible. They did not have social media, but people lived like till 20 years old. So what is interesting is that there are women, and we know this because we have cave paintings, but there were women that when they were exposed to this stressful environment, they developed gluteal femoral fat deposition, which is essentially where fat disorders really lay down, is in the rear end and in the lower extremities. And interestingly, these women, that fat in that area specifically regulates the reproduction axis. And so it was a huge gift, in fact, to all of us today that these women existed and that lipedema and Dercums were with us. Because when they were exposed to stress, their fat maintained their ability to reproduce and to nurse children. And they were wonderful because they let women like me who don't have a fat disorder, they gave us jobs, like basket weaving and minding the fire. And it was really a gift. And if you look at cave paintings, you look at art, goddess art from India, Greece, Egypt, that is a fat disorder silhouette that you see. If you think about Europe, and I speak of Europe because I'm American and I know a lot about European history, people that needed an heir, they chose a woman with a voluptuous shape because they knew if they mated with a woman that was voluptuous, they would have offspring. And that was important if you were King Henry VIII, right? He had a lot of tries to get the right offspring, but they knew it was important. And even more interestingly, the clothing of the time period represents how important it was, because they had those enormous panniers and bustles that were on all of their clothes. So women that didn't have this body type, they wanted it. And that is in contradistinction to 1950 and later, but I really want to highlight it. And if you go look, and I don't know if I didn't include it in this presentation, but if you go look at Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, he painted the ankle cuffs. He painted them because they were cherished and beautiful. And they represented resilience. They represented success, the ability to procreate, and literally the ability to go from generation A to generation B. So I just want to high five everybody and point that out and give you the challenge to look in all of these old paintings and representations of the ideal female body, and you will see fat disorder has been with us for a long time. It became disordered in the 1950s, I would say roughly, and that's where all the research now is geared at how can we undo the disordered piece. So Dercum's is not obesity. And this is a great slide talking about what Karen already mentioned. So I can just say that she didn't have to have a slide presentation. I made one for her. These are, again, all the cytokines that she talked about. I mean, it's truly hilarious. We did not pre-plan this, but they're all here. And what I did is I've talked about in these slides all of the different receptors and their inflammation pathway. And right before she had to go to her next gig, she talked about how every day she turns around and there's a new inflammatory pathway. So it's exciting because we have the vocabulary and we know certain things to look at, and there's a lot of stuff that we still don't know, but we've got little glimmers of hope to find out. And so this is all for you guys to look at and to review. It's more. And what I want to just talk on, she talked about some histologic findings when she was, and therapeutic implications. And I'm going to get to that a little bit at the end when I talk about our soft drive. And it's part of the genetic research that she's doing. But histologic findings, when she was talking about looking at slides and looking at tissue, that's called histology. And she is, at what we call the bench, looking at the tissue, looking at the anatomy of the tissue, that micro anatomic component. And we know enough that she can say, wow, that's connected to this receptor or that receptor. And that can suggest physiology that suggests therapeutic implications. And specifically, when she mentioned GLP-1 and Dercums, I just, I want to give Dercums to, or GLP-1s to almost everyone I meet. It's truly a miracle. It is a miracle. This is a great slide talking about the different pieces of Dercum's disease and inflammation. And when we talk about treating a fat disorder, and we talk about treating Dercums, and we're not talking about surgical piece, we're talking about in general management. There's three main components that drive inflammation in a human being. There's the brain component that drives it, and that's the stress. So in cave people time, it was, food insecurity, housing insecurity, literal death if you ate the wrong berry. It was profoundly stressful. Today there's social media. There's also the news. In any country, there's the news. There are, we're not perfect as people, and we can be hard on each other and hurt each other. And that is hard on us, and that is hard on our brain, and trauma is real. So that's one component. The middle component I like to think of is the body component. So body drivers, and this is where the little venous component comes in, and I'll touch on it a little bit, because I also think the venous component is responsible for what we call the pain gap in fat disorders. But if you go back to what Karen said about when you have the disordered fat and the dysregulated capillary compartment, and you find dilated blood vessels, that is absolutely the truth. And so when you look back at this presentation, I want you to look back at my slide, the all roads lead to Rome slide. And you will find that on one side of the capillary is the vein. And when that capillary is clogged with all those inflammatory proteins and it is not draining well, it causes, I believe, we do not have evidence yet, but hopefully the Vanderbilt team can help us. But it makes sense to me that that venous component would dilate. And when it dilates, it reduces its resistance. And when the saphenous vein dilates, the valves no longer touch. And so the vein, the macro vein, is unable to work properly. And instead of the blood going from the ankle to the heart, the blood goes from the heart to the ankle. And when you reverse that flow, the lower extremity becomes swollen, heavy, achy, tender to the touch on the inside knee and lower calf, worse at the end of the day than the beginning. Elevation feels like a dream. Patients that have found compression will tell you they look forward to their compression. These patients have restlessness, more common in the lower extremity in the evening. They have difficulty standing for long periods of time. I have had patients tell me they have a backpack chair, which I didn't even know about because I don't have venous insufficiency or a fat disorder. And after I operate on their veins, they told me they took the backpack chair out of their car because they could finally stand in line when they're waiting for their children at school or at the post office. It impacts mobility. I have had venous patients tell me they had installed an elevator because they could no longer do the stairs. And I operated on their veins, and suddenly they were able to do the stairs. And I was floored because that is so expensive to put in an elevator. Holy cow. But it speaks to the impact that venous disease has on mobility. And when a patient and people, folks that have fat disorder, almost 99% of them have venous insufficiency. I mean, it's weird. There's no such thing in medicine that's 100%. And so there has to be a very deep physiologic connection between the two. And it is at the capillary. And Karen set this piece up so beautifully with talking about the gel in the capillary and the dilatation that we see when she looks at the slides in those blood vessels. And that is how I believe venous disease is kind of a different pathophysiology than a patient who just has venous disease. But the outcome, the pain, and living with the disease is very, very similar, as is the improved pain, the improved mobility, the improved swelling after treatment. And this is a gap because this little piece of fat disorder, I think, has really been invisible. And that is a huge piece of the body. The second piece is the chemical piece. And we have had, I think it's Lori Ann. I'm really terrible with names, but she has that beautiful voice, and she's wearing a pretty hot pink tonight. And she sent Karen some of those patients for the samples, but she did a wonderful presentation at our last one talking about insulin and the dysregulation of insulin in the body. So processed food is just Satan. I mean, and you cannot, even if you think you're eating farm to table, those dead gum corns have been modified, genetically modified. Bananas. I mean, it is bananas. I mean, it's obvious if you're eating an Oreo, right? That did not come out of your backyard. But it is not so obvious when you're in the produce section of the grocery store. And so all of that processed food is so difficult, and it activates our inflammation. And it is causing cancer in people that don't have fat disorder. So it is just terrible. And then the other piece that is honestly just like the Super Bowl for fat disorder, and that is GLP-1. Total game changer. You know, it's functionally a hormone the way it works, and it does brain surgery because when you get the shot, it changes the nuclei in the brain that control the leptin pathway, that control the ghrelin pathway, that control the insulin resistance, that control the inflammatory pathway. So it's kind of like HRT. And I know Dr. Haggerty and Stephen and Ray, y'all are here, and there's probably other men, but it is like HRT for fat cell disorder. It's incredible. By doing the GLP-1, I believe, we don't have studies yet, but we're all collecting this data on our patients. We're going to be able to see reversal of Dercum's. Karen said it tonight, but maybe stabilization of your staging in fat disorder or reduction in staging. And I've spoken to Dan Haggerty, who's on tonight, who's a wonderful fat reduction surgeon, just wonderful. And I've seen him operate, and he's terrific. And he and I haven't had a chance to talk about this because no one has any time because we're all so busy taking great care of y'all. It still takes a lot of time. But I have spoken to lipedema reduction surgeons over in Europe, and they tell me their patients that are on GLP-1s accidentally peri-op have reduced post-op swelling and better outcomes from lipedema reduction surgery. So all of that is coming, but I just want you to know this is very exciting. And maybe at the end, Dr. Haggerty may have some things he can share about that, his experience as a reduction surgeon with GLP-1s. And there's Diosmin, which I recommend. Karen already talked about that. And also metformin. Metformin off-label is great. And I'm going to get into some other things that Dr. Steve talks about, because as he has disclosed, he is also a Dercum's patient. So this is Dr. Stephen D'Angelo, who's here. Hello, Dr. Stephen D'Angelo. And this part of it is his, and I have a quote from him, and maybe I tried to shorten this to make it better, but he had a wonderful quote from his fat disorder about what it is like to live with the fat disorder that is Dercum's. And he's also a genetic cancer researcher. So he's an expert in all of these things that we need solved. So this is what he talked about at FDRS this past spring, but this is how he works on it. And you can see he is addressing all of the things, the three things, the brain, the body, and the chemistry. He is addressing the three things. And I want to get us to the end, give us some time for questions. So I'm going to go through some of these things. Avoiding opiates, he has, he can talk about it, but it's very exciting. MCAS, I mean, y'all, this is so exciting. The pentoxifylline down there, that's for the vascular piece. Turns out I prescribe that for patients that have artery disease, which is an inflammatory disease of the arteries, and that makes atherosclerosis. See, guys, it's all coming together. All roads lead to Rome. This is some of the components of GLP-1. Tirzepatide, I think, is the winner because it has GLP-1 and GIP. And if you remember T for timeout, it's tirzepatide if you want to talk to your physician about it. I want you to put select trial into ChatGPT tonight, and I want you to ask ChatGPT to tell you about the select trial, inflammation, and heart attack, guys. And just be sitting down when you look, because it's exciting. This I've laid pros and cons so you could weigh tirzepatide and semaglutide, because I know so many of you guys have to be your own advocate, and y'all are incredibly sophisticated. As my patient, when you guys come to me, it's like talking to another physician. So this is physician level info, but you guys, this is the world y'all live in. So I think it may be better, and this is why. This is, here's our quotation, the next frontier. This is from Stephen D'Angelo. We can dive into the unknowns and we can discover the underlying mutations. So we've made our steps on the moon. Now we got to make this, the space, not the spaceship, guys, but the space station. That's what we got to get on. And it's through genetic analysis. Okay, boxbar way briefly. I love this. And I made this dorky thing. I love this little thing because it just tells me in a nutshell all the three things. Okay. The first rule of any fat disorder Dercum's is no different. It's to be kind to yourself. I mean, if you can't do anything for your Dercum's today, that's all you got to do, and call it good and go to bed, because tomorrow's another day. So that's why I have the heart in there. And that little box bar is my family's brand. That's how I came up with this name. It's literally a branding iron, and it's called the box bar. So in the middle of it is the heart, and that is to be kind to yourself. That's where all of this is. The second thing is work on your pain. And that's the bar, because, it's like a barbell for your body. So you got to work on the pain. And then the third thing is the physiologic. You have to nourish yourself from the inside. And that's the rainbow, because it's hard to know what to eat. And if you're on the internet, there's about a bazillion influencers that are going to tell you, eat this and eat that, and it cured this and it cured that. And the truth is, there's different things work for different people. And Karen talked about that. We all have a little bit of a different makeup in our physiology. But the rule of thumb, the easy peasy is this: if it's colorful, eat it and don't count it. If it's white, think about it. So eat the rainbow, right? And then what is white? So white is anything processed. It doesn't matter if it's an Oreo, that's white, it's processed. I had a precious patient who's a dietitian say, well, I'm trying to figure out why I get such a flare when I eat out. And I was like, oh, it doesn't matter what you eat if you're eating out. If it's a piece of lettuce or a burrito, it's considered white. you know, anything you're going to buy that you don't make is by definition processed. So that's white. Alcohol is white. Ice cream, dairy, gluten, carbohydrates, they're all white. They get broken down into simple sugars. So it's a rule of thumb. Eat the rainbow, don't count, eat as much as you want. If it's white, think about it. Get in the habit of eating more rainbow than white. If you eat some white, you know, don't freak out. You know, guys, I really like Oreos. And sometimes I'm stressed. And the only thing that really helps me is the Oreos. And recently, you know, I was at the grocery, I bought some Oreos. My husband asked me why I was putting the Oreos in the box. I said, well, I'm studying for my board certification in obesity medicine, and I'm nervous and I need to eat the Oreos. So we laughed. If you eat something white, you're going to notice a flare for about 3 days. The scale's going to jump 8 pounds. Do not freak out. It's okay. If you've done with your Oreos, on the 4th day, you'll be back to normal. So just don't worry. That's biology. It's nothing. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't hurt yourself. You just had Oreos because, you know, or you have to live too. Okay, this is our team. None of this could happen without our team. We're a tiny team. Ray Wood asked me who could help with press release, and I was like, myself. But I have assigned Ava, who's down in the front with the long hair. She's helping us out with this. This is our team. When you call us and email us, it's one of us that you're talking to. And we have 3 precious UW students who are new, who are helping us start some research and some other things. So you'll see them in and out. And this is questions. And it turns out when I added this slideshow, there were 2 slides that I left out. And I'm going to end this and I'm going to add that other slideshow that I want to show, because there are 2 things that I want to show you on this one. And I'm going to see if I can get us to the end. Oh, here we are. Okay. This is the first slide. And take a picture of this, guys, because I love this. It's mind the gap and it's the pain gap. And this is really important. And this is the piece that connects Karen's histologic microanatomic discussion of the capillary and what goes wrong, and my macro discussion of venous insufficiency. And it is in 99% of people with a fat disorder. And then I'm going to skip here to the end because this is our soft drive that you are seeing myself and Ray, and Stephen DeAngelo is part of it. And we're just going to post this ad nauseum. And I want to post so much that you don't even think about it. I have 15 boxes to sell. And if we can sell all these boxes of socks, all of the proceeds are going to go to a research project, a genetic mapping project that Stephen DeAngelo and I are going to do specifically for Dercum's disease. That's the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow. Woo, boy, that was pretty good. Amazing. You worked it all in. Dr. Haggerty,
You're making it better.
I wonder if you have any thoughts, Dr. Haggerty.
Well, pretty impressive. I certainly agree and applaud everything Dr. Derek has said. There's certainly a lot of physiology in here. We've gotten into kind of the weeds, kind of the details, the nitty-gritties. Dr. Herbst was really talking about specific molecules and proteoglycans and stuff like that. And it was nice to hear Dr. Derek kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture and the physiology of the body. There's still a lot that's unknown, but I agree with everything that's been said tonight, and it's exciting to hear people talk about it and try and put some of these puzzle pieces together, especially as we hear from patients talking about their experience and then trying to overlap that with the bits and pieces of the science that we're trying to understand. And man, how exciting that could be if we can get this genetic thing going off with Dr. Derek and Dr. DeAngelo. So I wasn't aware of that. That's exciting. So thanks for the heads up.
I just ordered my pair of socks. I ordered the ghost ones. They're adorable. I can't wait. But now I think we should go to Juanita for questions from the audience.
Nikki,
can I ask
you want to go? Yeah, I see
Yeah.
your hand.
Sorry, Nikki.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Derek, I wanted to ask about the GLPs that are not accessible to me in my country, but also when I read the Dercum's disease answers, a lot of the time people take them, they say it really increases their pain. And I'm wondering if you've had any experience of that.
So I've not had that experience, and that's an excellent clinical question. And I wouldn't be able to hypothesize on that unless I was speaking with someone who I could drill down a little bit more in what they mean.
Okay.
Sorry.
I also, if I may, I just wanted to take the opportunity. I'm a Dercum's disease sufferer as well, but I wanted to thank you for the, sorry, I feel very triggered. Thank you for the mental health perspective today, because I find that sometimes the hardest.
Well, we know how you feel. Trust me.
Yeah.
You're doing
You're gonna make
wonderful.
me cry.
We're very proud of you. Thank you.
So
Thank
hard.
you.
Dr.
Do we
D'Angelo?
want to?
I mean, this is, for a lot of it, this is our experience, and it's hard. And the whole thing has been getting ignored for years, decades, and, you know, being told, you know, this doesn't make sense, you know, what you have, you know, there's no answer for this, there's no reason why you're in this much pain. And it's, you know, I feel very, you know, emotional just seeing such a great community involvement and feeling so lucky to be part of it. So I mean, just thank you to everybody, especially everybody, you know, watching in and making this possible. You know, this is really a community effort to go into what is still a medical mystery and unknown in this area of painful fat and dysfunctional fat. To answer one of the questions that just came up about the GLP-1s, I think what's important to remember is that there are multiple types of GLP-1s in the market right now, even though that distinction isn't always being made to patients. You have the first generations of the semaglutide, which is, you know, the Ozempic, and that's the one that's associated with a lot of GI issues. So for patients on that medication, I could definitely see the GI issues leading to an increase in symptoms, if that's, you know, a shared experience. Whereas the second generation and soon to be released third generation of GLP-1s really target inflammation. So that's really a critical distinction. And the mechanism of those second generations is really almost not even appetite suppressant, which is a primary mechanism of the first generation. It's really a molecular reduction of inflammation markers. And we still actually don't know exactly how they work completely. That's still, a lot of how they work is still a mystery. I've, you know, been honored to see talks by, you know, people like the VP of Eli Lilly who have come to talk about it at different universities, and they still don't know how it works exactly. But it's having these remarkable effects in patients. So yes, they are still horribly expensive. That is a part of the pharmaceutical industry we can't control. But we're hoping that they become affordable and more affordable for patients as more insurance start to cover them.
Juanita, I'd like to say something quickly, and then we could ask some questions, please, if I can.
Of course.
You know, a whole lot of us were managing our Dercum symptoms long before there was any GLP. So don't give up hope just because you can't get a GLP. We can do things right now to help you. I'm glad this GLP thing is happening, but many, 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 many of us cannot, for whatever reason, get access, and there are still real answers for us. So I'll get off my soapbox and let y'all go ahead with the Q&A.
Well said.
Yeah,
really well said. That was perfect.
Yeah, it's definitely
Yes.
a way. It doesn't have to be the only way.
Yes.
Yeah, to Ray's point as well, you know, really this is a debilitating disease. And, you know, the motto that I have is anything is better than nothing. So on the days where I struggle, if I'm able to get, you know, out of bed and make myself a good meal or go for a 5-minute walk, I did something. And as long as you keep doing something, you'll make progress. Even if it doesn't feel like it at the time, it's a whole body issue. and a whole body method to, the madness that we live with every day. So there is, and
let's get a couple more questions in. Juanita,
Yes.
can
I
we
would like
get
to.
2 more questions maybe?
Sure. I'm looking at some, to be fair to Dr. Derek, that are related to vascular. There's one here that says, does the vascular issues caused by Dercums create issues for all blood vessels? More specifically, retinopathy? Did I say that right?
That's a good question.
That's a great question. And we don't have any data with that right now. Retinopathy is associated with insulin dysregulation, which is an inflammatory pathway. And that's just a wonderful question. And it could be, but we don't have data yet, population or anatomic, to for me to give a clinical answer. But yes, could be. That could be.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying. There's a lot of questions in here, and just so everybody knows, we're gonna copy these and get it on a document so that we can try to answer them all at a later time. Okay. Anybody have an answer to this? How to find a doctor to diagnose Dercums in Western Australia? Do we have any doctors out that way yet?
No.
Okay.
I'm
Has
sorry.
there?
But let me preface that by saying, or maybe I should preface is the wrong word, but we are finding that people are getting telehealth appointments to some of our thought leaders. It's not the best answer by far, but I mean, there's people that have calendars in the States, and you could be able to wrangle yourself an appointment.
Okay, and I'm so sorry. Things are going. Yeah, there's a lot being added right here, but I want to make sure. So Mary Maud, she is in our audience, and she's on our board, and she wants to mention if you guys have any questions about our friendly provider list that we have on our Dercum's disease answers site, to contact her. And she does give the email address, friendly providers list, altogether, friendly providers list at outlook.com. She would like to stay on top of adding and removing doctors so that we have it up to date. Okay. I think that's
I think
pretty.
I should be the party pooper and tell everybody we have to go home. Because Dr. Derek and everybody have given us so much of their time, and we appreciate all of you for showing up. It is really heartwarming. Everybody should have hope when they look around this meeting and see how many people are here, how many doctors care. They do care.
Good point. And Nikki, thank you for being raw.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you, Nikki.
No, really.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Boy, I can explode. It's so incredible.
Thank you, everyone.
It's just
And
the
of course, thank you
beginning.
to Ray to organizing everything.
Absolutely, Ray. Ray's the man.
You're all welcome. You're all welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Derek. Great
Thank
message.
you, Dr. Derek.
Appreciate your work.
Okay.
All
Great.
right.
Bye. Have a good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Good
Bye,
night.
y'all.